Here we go. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so I thought we'd do this a cappella this morning. And what I'd like to do is have this side of the congregation do the melody. This side will do the descant. Okay, so I've got the choir that's going to help us out with this. And Ben, if you could give us the first note. Ben has perfect pitch, incidentally. If you ask him for any note, he can sing it for you. So can I have a C? Okay, ready? The drone goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not a particularly exciting part. Okay, altos, if we could have the melody. Beautiful. Okay, so that's the part that this side is going to be singing. So now if I can have the sopranos come in with the descant. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if we can keep the drone going just for a minute. Keep going. Okay, everybody got their parts? This time around, let's all sing it together 4 times through. Ready? Go. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I bring out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. One more time. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe. And now just the drone one time. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe. Very good, thank you.
We breathe in and we breathe out. We breathe in and we breathe out as we enter this time that we set aside for meditation, contemplation, and prayer. O Spirit of life and love, who moves in us as we breathe in and we breathe out, we give thanks for this day. A day like many others, but also completely new. I give thanks for this community, for the people who make it what it is, for the people who lead, for the leaves turning brilliant shades, we hope, of orange, red, and yellow. As we watch these leaves turn, we are reminded that sometimes the best moments in life are fleeting, but they last forever in our memories. We give thanks for the things that we have. Clean water, warm water too sometimes. The people sitting to our left and our right. We know too that there is much sorrow in our world. There are people hurting, people living with illness, people mourning, people living with addiction. Let us reach out to all those in our community who are hurting. May we be emboldened to reach out, lend a listening ear, or a casserole, or some soup. These are all ways we make tangible our love. We know, too, that in our world there are people who are suffering under oppression, especially the people of Iran this week, who have taken to the streets in protest since the death of a 22-year-old. We also hold in our hearts those people in Puerto Rico experiencing massive blackouts after Hurricane Fiona. Even though we might be grateful for clean water, we know that there are those in our country who go without. Because we are breathing, we are human, and humans make mistakes. We say things that we might not mean to say. We are forgetful, and we are clumsy. Sometimes we fail epically. Because we are breathing, there is still an opportunity to move back into right relationship. It might not take a minute, it might take longer to move back into that right relationship, but it is still possible because we are breathing. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. Let us now sit in the quiet of this old house so that we might rest or listen, pray the prayers of our own hearts, or simply do nothing for 1 minute. I'll keep track of the time. May it be so, and amen.
One of my all-time favorite quotes is from Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams, who wrote, "Church is a place where you get to practice what it means to be human. Part of that practicing is engaging in mutual support, a sharing of what we each have pulled together for the common good. So in that pulling together, I invite you to contribute to our offering, to helping to maintain this beautiful historic place. Our offering will now be gratefully received." Our reading is Prophetic Outlook by Ernest Hilbert. Crooks run the whole world, and the Dow just fell. Crap rules the airways, all your best plans stall. The air is dirty and you don't feel well. Your spouse won't listen, and friends no longer call. Sad songs from youth no longer cast a spell. Cancer research has run into a wall. Some inflated hack just won the Nobel. You witness clear signs of decline and fall. The neighbors are cold and your house won't sell. Your cat has bad teeth and your paychecks feel small. Maybe you're really sick. It's hard to tell. Up ahead, traffic has slowed to a crawl. The world didn't start going to hell. You just noticed for the first time, that's all.
In the foothills of the Himalayas long ago, I know, we're skipping the first verse of Wake Now My Senses. Don't worry, we got it under control. In the foothills of the Himalayas long ago, there was a prince, Siddhartha Gautama. You might know him by another name. We'll get there in a second. At his birth, seers foretold that he would either become, 1, a great king, or 2, an enlightened teacher. Now, the path to which he would become a king was easy. He just didn't have to go outside of the walls of the palace. He would be an enlightened teacher, the seers told, if he saw 4 passing sights: old age, sickness, death, and a wandering ascetic. Now, his father, the king, wanted very desperately to make sure that his son became king. So he shielded his son from those realities. And the king was very successful for 29 years. But then, the prince left the palace grounds and for the first time saw suffering. He saw 4 sights: a man bent over with old age, a person afflicted with sickness, a corpse, and a wandering ascetic. It was that 4th sight, that of the ascetic, that filled Siddhartha Gautama with a sense of urgency to find out what lay at the root of human suffering. You might know Siddhartha Gautama as the Buddha. Or, in this moment, to evoke the poem that Barb read from, the world the prince lived in didn't just start going to hell. He just noticed for the first time. That's all. Today, we are talking about prophets, who they were, what they did, and why they are needed. In this next year, I want to explore what it might sound like if we were to be prophetic about democracy, reproductive dignity, and saving the earth. So look forward, future coming attractions for this loose series of sermons over the course of the year. But today, we need to establish a baseline. Who were the prophets? And work to reclaim prophetic witness. Now, if you are like not every, but most other Unitarian Universalists I have met, when you hear the word prophet, kind of shiver a little bit. We bristle when I say that word because you probably have a definition in your minds. We all have them. And that's the definition you're reacting to. I don't think, though I haven't read all of your minds, I don't think I'm talking about that sort of prophet that you are shuddering at. In that definition that we reject, that I reject, what do the prophets do? They predict what stocks to buy, predict the outcome of the Red Sox season, all while gazing into a crystal ball. We think that they predict the future. The prophets of old did not do that. For one, there was no stock market, There were no Red Sox. Gregory Mobley says that the Hebrew prophets were performers, not authors. They were not analogous to preachers in morning suits, reading prepared manuscripts or notes. They were more akin to poetry slammers, rappers, performance artists, folk singers, holiness preachers, merry pranksters, and street performers. We are accustomed to imagine prophetic vision as foresighted, as seeing forward. I wonder who in your life, over however many years you have lived, who have been prophets who have been more like performers. Mobley goes on to say, but prediction is not the focus of biblical prophecy. Rather, as the Jewish theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel observed, biblical prophecy is insighted, not foresighted. Biblical prophecy is insightful. It is about seeing through. The prophet sees through the veil of appearances to glimpse a different reality. The prophet sees a world that is charged with the grandeur of God or the divine or the universe and glimpses the cosmic reality that are invisible to the prophet's peers. Prophetic vision penetrates everydayness to go deeper than conventional wisdom in order to reveal the story behind the story, the baseline behind the headline. Insighted, not foresighted. With that in mind, who might the prophets be of this age? I know a number of you on Facebook follow Heather Cox Richardson. She's a professor of American history at Boston College, or you might be a colleague of hers. And some of what she writes about, she shares insights into current events through the lens of American history. And I think in that way it's insightful. It is insightful prophetic witness, not foresighted. So if that is the role of the prophet, what about us gathered here? What role do we play? Have you always been aware of injustice? Or are you like the person described in Hilbert's poem when he writes, "The world didn't just start going to hell, you just noticed for the first time. That's all." Though I would hazard to guess, in a world where there is so much media out there, that none of us today is perhaps completely unaware of what is happening in the world. So I titled this service, "The Prophethood of All." What does that mean? A few people have written about it over the years, but the best was what James Luther Adams, whose words we heard from Barb already today, what James Luther Adams wrote about. He was a Unitarian theologian who was working and doing his work in the 20th century. He wrote that the prophetic liberal church is not a church in which the prophetic function is assigned to merely a few. The prophetic liberal church is the church in which people think and work together to interpret the signs of the times in light of their faith, to explicate through discussion the epical thinking that the times demand. Adams goes on to remind us that this prophetic liberal church is the church in which all members share the common responsibility to attempt to foresee the consequences of human behavior, both individual and institutional, with the intention of making history in place of merely being pushed around by it. Adams closes with this reminder: only through the prophetism of all believers can we together foresee doom and mend our common ways. What a beautiful thing to be thinking about today. This afternoon, I'll be installed as your minister. It is a ceremony that happens infrequently, at best. Indeed, in our 321-year history, it has happened 24 times before today. And what I want us to remember, and what I hope you remember throughout the liturgy, is that this work of ministry is shared. It is something that you all hold in some way. Some churches, particularly our siblings in the United Church of Christ, across the street or up in Saxonville, for instance, will list in their staff listings under ministers, they will write every member of the church is a minister. And then under pastor, the ordained pastor's name, to remind people that everyone shares in the ministry of this congregation. And it is true here as well. Adam's prophethood of all is different from the traditional definition of prophetic witness. Now, traditionally, the prophets, there was no school for them to go to learn the ways and wisdom, to learn how to be prophetic. Indeed, I don't think that I could tell you, I don't think I could write a how-to manual about how to be prophetic. The prophets of old had fire in their mouths and didn't need to read a manual. There was nothing they could do but to speak. Being a prophet in the biblical sense also involves an optimism and an imagination. We know that there is injustice because we believe that another world is possible. The prophets were not pessimistic. They were optimistic or perhaps realistic. We all know that there is a gap when we see the world. There is a gap between the world as it is and the world that we dream about. And that gap, that is heartbreaking, but that is how we know that work needs to be done. I go back to Siddhartha, now the Buddha. Once he learned that there was suffering, he was changed. And it changed him so much that he could not continue to live his life the way that he had been doing it before. This shock, this dismay, this urgency in Buddhism is known as samvega. According to an American Buddhist monk, Therasaro Bhikkhu, it is a chastening sense of our own complacency and foolishness in having let ourselves live in this way that we're unaware, and an anxious sense of urgency in trying to find a way out of this meaningless cycle. Now, I am not so much interested in how we can be prophets, because there needs to be more urgency than that. I am more concerned with how we must be prophets. I think it goes to the heart of our faith, Unitarian Universalism, which is a faith that moves, it does not sit or stand still. In 1920, a Universalist minister, when writing about his faith tradition, said, Universalists are often asked to tell where they stand. The only true answer to this question is that we do not stand at all, we move. I remain convicted that we must move when there is injustice because of a passage from Leviticus, which is my favorite passage from Leviticus. The rest are a little bit problematic. And I can only remember it as this: do not stand idly by while your neighbor's blood is shed. It doesn't just have to be blood shed in the literal sense. It could be metaphorical as well. Does this passage mean that we have to save everyone and everything? Do we have to respond to everything? I don't think it does, but we can also not do absolutely nothing. In the Talmud we read, it is not your responsibility to finish the work of perfecting the world, but you are not free to desist from it either. I'll say that again. It is not your responsibility to finish the work of perfecting the world, but you are not free to desist from it either. If the Buddha was changed by seeing suffering, my friends, how will we be changed by this devastatingly beautiful but also broken world? Where will we move? And how will we work to love the hell out of this world? Let us now sing Wake Now, My Senses, number 298. saving, as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Comfort thy limit, sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, and striving their hardship to end. Wake now, my conscience, with justice I guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take God for granted the privilege praise. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now, my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care. I close with these words from Rebecca Parker. In the midst of a world marked by tragedy and beauty, there must be those who bear witness against unnecessary destruction and who, with faith, rise and lead in freedom with grace and power. There must be those who speak honestly and do not avoid seeing what must be seen of sorrow and outrage or tenderness and wonder. There must be those whose grief troubles the waters while their voices sing and speak refreshed words. There must be those whose exuberance rises with lovely energy that articulates the earth's joys. There must be those who are restless for respectful and loving companionship among human beings, whose presence invites people to be themselves without fear. There must be those who gather with the congregation of remembrance and compassion, draw water from old wells, and walk the simple path of love for neighbor. And there must be communities of people who seek to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly, who call on the strength of soul force to heal, transform, and bless life. This way of living is not for the faint-hearted, and friends, you do not have to do it alone. Let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. Amen, and go in peace.